So this is a goofy, fun, action-adventure romp, but aren't they all? I'm Jack Fitzpatrick and this is my review of Thor Ragnarok. It truly is a marvel to look back on the original Thor and think about where this franchise has gone and what it's evolved to. Do you see what I did there? Because Marvel... You wouldn't get it. So going into Thor Ragnarok, I think I pretty much knew what to expect. And you know what? Despite the quirkiness and the approach feeling like it was trying a little too hard to be different, I think it did turn out to pretty much be what I expected. Not that there weren't any surprises, and not that this wasn't a really fun time in the movies, but it was just kind of the same old disposable in between the big event Marvel movie. And I'm neither ecstatic about nor disappointed by this. It's one hell of an okay, pretty fun movie. So let's get into the details by starting with some positives. Thor himself felt like he had much more personality in this one. He kind of came off as James Bondish at times, but more like a satirical and, medieval version of him. He had the kind of arrogance to him that made for some truly funny moments when things didn't always work out. Another point that I'll give to Ragnarok is that it's easily the best Thor film. Like, easily. But that's not saying that much in all honesty. It's not like the bar is outrageously high to begin with. Them Thor movies, am I right? I am. You don't have to answer. It's okay. This also felt like a much more modernized version of a Thor movie, which I didn't mind at all. It didn't feel as Shakespearean and melodramatic. It had much more of a sense of humor about itself, and I think that this was very much due to the man behind the camera, Taika Waititi. If there is any one thing to appreciate about Thor Ragnarok, it's this guy's sense of humor and style. Waititi's influence is definitely apparent throughout, as we constantly experience on-the-fly jokes and meet odd characters. The imagery throughout, the setting, and the style overall did feel like it was really going for something fresh. It's the plot points and overall story where this wasn't so strongly the case, with the movie falling back into a familiar cinematic structure. And I feel like this would have been the studio's influence over Waititi. I'm not exactly sure on this, but sometimes it felt like there may have been a little bit of conflict between them, with Waititi wanting to go one way and Marvel another. The issue was that Thor Ragnarok could have been either an epic tale of good versus evil and possess vital elements for the cinematic universe, or it could have just been a silly bit of fun. But it kind of went for a bit of both and ultimately felt a little torn. From the beginning, the Lord of Thunder is thrust into a few different situations involving crazy comedic scenarios. He also fights a giant monster. He also reunites with some characters. He also hangs out in Asgard for a bit. He also meets a villain. He then gets stuck on some other planet somewhere called Sakaar, and then, look, some other stuff happens. There's a lot going on is what I'm saying. Much of the film felt like a straight-up comedy though, which I honestly don't mind. In fact, I think it's kind of great, but it did leave little room for telling the story elements that I felt like Marvel felt like they needed to do. And that's where the problem really lies. Whenever we are with Thor in Sakaar, things run smoothly. It's all kind of quirky, but it's all good fun. But the film sometimes felt like it was an obligation to tell the other side of the story, involving the villain played by Cate Blanchett. And so by the end, you're kind of sitting there thinking, bring Thor back to Sakaar. That was like way more fun. And so when we finally get a resolution to this side, it was kind of weightless. And in that way, the film felt a little unbalanced. Neither side was bad, but one felt like it could have had more to it, and the other felt like it was diminished by the half-assedness of the other, I guess. Look, regardless of my mouthful sentences, it was a bit weird that the apocalypse or whatever was kind of the side story. But also sort of interesting. It's becoming clear that I, much like the movie, have mixed feelings. Anyway, so I just mentioned before, Cate Blanchett plays the villain, Hela, and here's the thing, she's fine. And I feel like I'm saying this again, goddammit, but this Marvel villain plays out much like the others. She's kind of got a reason to be evil, but it's not that great a story. She's played by an actor with prestige, but kind of doesn't need to be, and she's, again, sort of just a different version of Thor. But I didn't mind her. She had some interesting elements to her, maybe a little more so than other Marvel villains, and look, it was cool to see how powerful she was, taking on various characters, including Thor, with ease. Speaking of various characters though, I gotta talk about Loki, because oh my god, I'm sick of Loki. Loki was just the same old shit. I get it. You betray everyone all the time. I get it. You're evil, but you're not evil or something. I get it. You can clone holographic versions of yourself. I get it. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I've just never been much of a fan of Loki, and he's for some reason a fan favorite, but I'm done. My Loki complaining thing is over. It's sort of irrelevant anyway. Actually, speaking of various characters though, I have to say that an element that I really like about the MCU at the moment, and this movie in particular, is how each character can just be in each other's movies without it being a big deal. Hulk plays a big part in this film, which is really awesome, and it doesn't feel forced whatsoever. Another issue that I did have with the movie is that it sometimes felt like it relied a little too heavily on the audience remembering and caring about how the worst MCU movie that came out like 5 years ago ended. The aftermath of some of the loose ends from the last Thor movie was a bit muddled and rushed, playing into that unbalanced feeling. Like, no one cares how Thor 2 ended. It's the worst one. Anyway, in the end, Thor Ragnarok is really fun, and I feel like that sentence has been stated about 500 million times around the world about now, because, look, everyone knows, everyone is saying the same thing. Thor is fun. There's no denying it. But it's not perfect, but you know what? Even with my complaints and problems, I still feel like those things are mostly nitpicking, because, like I said, Thor Ragnarok is fun, and there's nothing wrong with fun. It certainly didn't change the game, but it did go for something a bit different in terms of setting and style. That being said though, despite its lighthearted take, the film did manage to have the guts to make some major changes, things that will affect later films in the MCU, and by the end of it, surprisingly does become a bit of an epic. Thor Ragnarok is sometimes kind of random and silly and feels like it's even too obscure for its own good, but I think that's kind of what makes it special in a world full of randomness, silliness, and obscurity. Thor Ragnarok takes it that one step further. Chris Hemsworth has really made the character his own, and I actually do look forward to his further endeavors as the character, however many left there may be. Because he might die in Infinity Wars. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. Anyway, whatever, I liked it. I would rate Thor an 8.5 out of 10. Hang on though, but before I go, before this ends, I do want to say one more thing. So, I'm a YouTube critic, right? So, obviously I have a lot of professional experience in this reviewing field. But I just feel like I have to mention that I'm kind of sick of every goddamn review ever, of every new goddamn Marvel movie ever, saying that it's the best and funnest one yet. Look, they can't all be the best and funnest one yet. Shut up. Thor Ragnarok is fun. Funnest? I don't know. Best? Hell no.